You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 706 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. I am reporting this on September the 11th. We're going to start with the maps. As always, I've got a migration map here, switch it up from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs map. This is a map from the migration cluster that shows, you're looking at a map on the screen with I don't know, what is it, dozens of arrows showing all of the neighborhoods in Gaza City, wider Gaza City, and Jabalia as well. This map already assumes the ethnic cleansing of Beit Lahia in the north west there, Beit Hanun in the northeast, and also around the buffer zone all the way down to the south, where we know that Rafah has been completely ethnically cleansed. We learned today that the 36th Division of the IDF has pulled out of Khan Yunis, so that marking on the map showing Khan Yunis being taken over. Again, they've pulled troops from there. They've left a shadow force in Khan Yunis. We know from my reporting last week and leaks within the Israeli military to the Israeli media that they believed that Gideon's chariots, the operation that we watched carry on from the middle of May until the late summer, was a failure. It failed to accomplish its goals, but it did accomplish the genocidal goals of destroying entire villages in the Khan Yunis area. And what we're looking at here is the number of people leaving Gaza City. And this is a number that's being tracked by the International Organization for Migration. This is an UNRWA. This is a site cluster of a number of organizations, the Norwegian and Danish refugee councils. And they show on this map that since August the 14th, 97,000 people have left Gaza City. The Israeli military today, I mean, they're updating this number every day, the Israeli military, because they want to make that seem like everybody has left Gaza City. But as Nora reported in the newscast, there's a lot of people that are not going to leave Gaza City. They didn't leave Gaza City the first time when they were told to evacuate. People don't believe there's anywhere to go. It was difficult enough to push everyone out of Gaza City the first time when people had money and resources and gas in their cars. None of that exists now. The roads are destroyed. There's nowhere for their tents to go in the south. So it's a total genocidal disaster. And Israel's bragging about it this week. Netanyahu spoke before the Israeli Air Force and bragged about how they had knocked down 50 towers in the previous 48 hours. And he said to Gazans, get out of there. This is just the beginning. So again, this matches the genocidal plans that the Israelis have been speaking about since October 7th consistently, that they're going to turn Gaza City, a city that's 5,000 years old, into Rafah, which is completely erased at this point. Israel's Air Force said this week that they bombed Gaza with 360 airstrikes in recent days, and that's a separate category than naval bombardment, than artillery bombardment, than the quadcopters dropping grenades on tents and homes. It's a separate category from the M113 armored personnel carrier robot bombs that they're sending in that blow up, that are tanks packed with explosives that blow up entire housing blocks. And so they're bragging and they're putting these numbers down on the record for the genocide trials. And I include these maps for those trials. And if we look at the next map, there's another one, another fresh map. This is from the United Nations satellite agency, and you can see the tents along the waterfront in precarious places. And on the right side of the map, you're looking at blue dots, yellow dots, red dots all along the coast. These are all tent camps all along the coast that are in, this was noted for being in a flood risk zone. But I want to show this map just to show you what the coastline of Gaza City looks like. It's packed with tents all the way up and down. And this is what Israel is trying to push people out of. There's one more map of this that shows, number 3, that shows the coastline as well. Just tents packed tight as far as you can see up and down the coastline. We take a look at the next map is the IDF's evacuation notice. Nora reported on similar leaflets that had been dropped on Gaza City. They're dropping them on individual neighborhoods. This one's forcing people out of the entire wider Gaza City and Jabalia area. So these are for the war crimes trials because this is blanket ethnic cleansing. It's illegal in every possible way. And as I said, they're bragging about it. Netanyahu bragged at the Air Force Base about dropping the towers. And I'm not going to show it to you because it's too specious, but the IDF released a video this week that was similar to the one they released about Shifa, the fake video of the Hamas command center under Shifa Hospital. They released another one of those about the high-rise towers in Gaza that house displaced people that already have all the windows blown out of them from previous attacks. And they showed them and said that they were terror towers and that they're destroying every one of them. And at the end of the video, it showed the whole area of Gaza City, the number of these towers that they are intending to knock out. And when they drop these towers, the towers are essentially entire neighborhoods in a tower. They're families, multiple generations of families in the towers. And it's because of the height of the towers. It's the amount of people living in there in the thousands. And so they've started this attack, this part of the war, as I reported weeks ago. The Israeli military drew down in Gaza at the end of Gideon's chariots, what they're calling part one. And they haven't, they're building up, but they haven't started the invasion of Gaza City at this point. This is strictly a war on civilians, and there's no pretense of anything other than that happening. And it's just incredible. If people didn't see Nora's newscast, she showed some of the videos of the towers being dropped. And you can just see entire, hundreds of families' lives just go up in a plume of smoke. This is strictly a war on civilians. There are still resistance operations, and we are going to take a look at some of those now. Let's take a look at the map of the northern Gaza Strip. You can see Gaza City, Tel El-Hawa, the Shati refugee camp. Those are the areas under displacement orders. Shujaiya, Zaytun, largely destroyed up to this point in Gideon's Chariots 1. Tufa, the same. And the Israelis are essentially just demolishing block by block. They're not fighting the resistance. They're not trying to find the resistance to fight. They're just dropping civilian homes with no military pretext whatsoever. There was there was 7 Qassam operations this week. They hit in defensive positions, which is what we've seen from the resistance operations in the last few weeks since the end of Gideon's Chariots. The operations are breaching operations of Israeli positions. We saw that in Khan Yunis, a breaching operation of an IDF outpost. And we're going to see that again today. The Qassam operation, a video was just released just before we went on air, showing an operation, again, a hand-delivered explosive being placed inside the hatch of a tank. These are the high-quality operations that Qassam said that they were going to be executing. They've created new weapons, guerrilla action devices for these operations to deposit the explosive directly into the hatch of the tanks or the armored personnel carriers. And the field report came out this week from Qassam of the video that we won't see. I'll break it down for you next week because it just came out as we are going on air. But the field report, again, matches exactly what you see on the video. Qassam fighters, Qassam says, were able on Monday to raid a position where enemy soldiers and vehicles were fortified. One of our fighters was able to climb on top of the Merkava tank and throw a Bark guerrilla action device inside the cockpit, which led to the killing and wounding of the tank's crew. This occurred in the Al Omari area in the center of Jabalia City in the north of the West Bank. Our fighters observed the landing of the medevac helicopters for evacuations. This operation was clear that they had waited for the return of the tank to come back to their position after moving. And that is the time where their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance would have shown in previous days that that's when they pop the hatch to get air in. When they're back in their outpost, they believe they're safe in their base, and the resistance attacked them. And that's what the preliminary IDF probe pointed out that 3 𝐓𝐶𝐞 operatives launched an attack on an army encampment in the 𝐓𝐵alia area. Around 6 a.m., the incident took place shortly after the troops had arrived at the outpost following their night activity. And they killed all 4 of the tank crew instantly, which the IDF acknowledged as well this week. Let's take a look at some of the other operations this week. This is in 𝐓𝐵alia, and they're calling these operations the Staff of Moses. This is to go this is the part of the battle renamed from the previous battle, which was Stones of David. We see the fighter here. He's saying, "We are the ones who pledged allegiance to God in struggle, and we will maintain this pledge to fight as long as we live." He then quotes a poem by Sudanese writer Muhammad Abd al-Bari. The poem ends, "And we will remain on the mountain of archers, and behind us the voice of the prophet shaking us. Do not leave, do not leave." And this is a poem that refers to the Battle of Uhud in the Quran, where the archers left their positions on the mountain. 50 archers left their positions, costing the Muslims the battle. We also saw that poem be used in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜 during the second battle of 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜. So here we see fighters advancing on a tank from cover, behind cover. They fire a Yasin strike, a direct hit on the tank, and the fighter here, you're going to see he uses the smoke and the chaos of the strike on the first tent as concealment. To now we see him running. We're with the cameraman here. The camera is on board with the fighter as he's running up to the armored personnel carrier and depositing the explosives into the hatch of the armored personnel carrier, attempting to put it in the hatch. And here we see the fighter returning to his base safely in this operation. It's a remarkable operation. There you see the guerrilla action device detonate in that operation. The fighters both return because you can see both cameramen in this operation in 𝐓𝐵alia. Again, you see it detonating there. A successful operation. Didn't go into the hatch. The hatch was locked on both of these operations. But here is the guerrilla action device. So now we're seeing another type of guerrilla action device. We've seen several of these throughout the war. At the beginning of the war, we were seeing them as Yasin 105 warheads that had magnets on them, and we saw the fighters go and stick them in between the turret gap, between the hull and the turret of the tank, and pull the pin, and the magnetic Yasin warhead sticks onto the tank and explodes. This is a different type that we're looking at here. I just wanted to draw your attention to it. They're able to adapt these weapons throughout the course of the war to carry out the operations that need to be, that they have seen an opening going into the war. They had many guerrilla action devices, but they were, like I said, magnetic. So they were presuming that you stuck them on the outside of the tank. But throughout the battle, the fighters had witnessed, we've all witnessed, Israeli tanks driving around with the hatch open and the commanders with their heads outside of the hatch, or while they're parked in their positions, the Israeli soldiers, the tank crew, open the hatches to get air. And that left a vulnerability that 𝐓𝐶aM is now exploiting with these guerrilla action devices. And I just wanted to show you that they have a different type of one. The announced operation that killed 4 tank crew was a BARC, the lightning explosive device. And this is a different one that we're seeing here. In this next slide, you can see 𝐓𝐶aM has pointed out this is the fighter returning to his base safely after depositing the guerrilla action device in the previous video that you saw. And it says, "In vain they try to uproot us, but we will sprout from the blood." And that's, again, Staff of Moses operations that are in opposition to, in defense of Gaza City and 𝐓𝐵alia. And we have another operation from this same series here. This one, you're going to see, we're watching now a fighter crossing through open space. There's a berm made by the Israelis to protect their tank, and we're watching the fighter here creep up the berm and walk. We see a company of tanks and armored personnel carriers. There's the zoom in on him, literally climbing up on top of the 𝐓𝐻𝐿 troop carrier, and he attempts to open the hatch. And in the field report, 𝐶𝐏𝐶 said the hatch was closed. So he's going to retreat here safely to his base, and the fighters are going to come up and launch Yasin strikes against those two tanks and 𝐓𝐻𝐿 troop carriers. So we're seeing these actions. We've seen them. The Israelis are saying, the Israeli military is saying that these are new, bold actions. But people who have been watching the Resistance Report and watching the resistance since the beginning of this war know the fighters have been bold all throughout this war. The guerrilla action device requires a boldness to affix it. And people even who watched the Second Intifada, the boldness of Palestinians around Israeli tanks is something that starts very young. It's not just the resistance fighters, it's also the stone-throwing children who confront tanks in the previous generation of Israel's war on the Palestinians. But there you can see the green triangle is the 𝐶𝐏𝐶 fighter climbing up on top of the 𝐓𝐻𝐿. You see him there. Now he's up on top, and he's trying to get, there's two hatches on the top of the 𝐓𝐻𝐿, and he's trying to open those, and they are locked. And then we've seen this before too, firing rounds from small arms at the same time as they fire the Yasin. I believe that's to try to distract the active protection system, the trophy system that's on, or the Iron Fist is some cases, that the firing on the sensors messes that up. That is the belief of what is going on here. But the battle is, of course, beyond Gaza. It is also in the West Bank. This is a video of 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿 that they have put together. Interestingly, some look like they have captured Israeli military gear, which goes with an army radio report earlier this week that captured Israeli gear was found. These are also operations previously in the battle of in northern Gaza, in the Tulkarm and Jenin camps, as well as Nur Shams camps. And it's a promo video that 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿's put out to say that we're here, we're on the battlefield, we're carrying out these operations. And it ends with saying, our struggle is ongoing, and we will continue to fight you until the liberation of Palestine, all of Palestine. And there was an operation today reported, a 𝐓𝐿𝐿 IED, named after the commander in the Tulkarm camp. He's from the Tulkarm camp, but he's the overall commander of 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐄𝐿's in Tulkarm. That operation wounded 2 IDF soldiers inside a troop carrier. And today is 232 days of siege of the camps in Jenin, and it's been 8 months, full 8-month siege on those camps. Earlier this week, Army Radio reported several Palestinians tried to return to the Jenin camp, which they have been expelled from, and the Jenin camp is in the process of being destroyed. They went back to look for belongings, and Israel shot and killed a number of them, which is exactly what Israel did in 1948 when they ethnically cleansed Palestine the first time. And they anyone coming back were called infiltrators. If they went back, Palestinians went back to try to get their belongings or to get some of their sheep because they had been driven out. They were killed by Israeli forces. And when you see that happening in Jenin, it definitely reminds you of that time. And just to give you a sense, though, in August, there was more than 180 clashes, stone-throwing clashes between youth and the Israeli military in the West Bank. These are happening every single day. Just a nutshell of a single day in September, September the 8th. There was an attack in occupied East Jerusalem that killed 7, 17 were wounded, but there was also clashes elsewhere around Jerusalem, but also in multiple places in Ramallah, multiple places in Jenin, multiple places in Tulkarm, in Nablus as well, and in Halil Hebron in the Al-Fawar camp. There's operations and clashes and resistance and refusing to submit operations going on in the West Bank all through the time that we're focused on Gaza in these reports. Of course, it's worth noting, of course, also that Israel's Operation Summit of Fire, the United States lured Hamas negotiators to Doha for a pretty sparse ceasefire agreement. And Israel used that opportunity to attempt to assassinate the Hamas leadership, but definitely destroyed the negotiations, which is just further proof that Israel is not interested in any kind of negotiation, likely collapsing the negotiations entirely. No interest in their POWs. And we saw last week those POWs in a video released by 𝐓𝐡𝐞. 𝐓𝐡𝐞's shadow unit showed two of the captives being driven around Gaza City. And you can see these two captives, these two soldiers, we saw them previously in the middle camps during the ceasefire. And the two soldiers, they introduce themselves to each other in this 𝐓𝐡𝐞 video, and the soldiers say, "How did you get here?" 𝐓𝐶 wanted to show that these captives are being moved, and the captives are in Gaza City, and Israel doesn't care about that. Obviously, we've known that throughout this entire war, but the attack on Qatar and Doha definitely proved that point. Let's take a look at Yemen briefly here, because the Yemeni support operations are continuing. This is the map we've shown before. The yellow are the areas of Israeli strikes in so-called Houthi territory, Ansar Allah territory, which is not a significant indicator. They control more territory than that map indicates. This is an Israeli map. But you can see the outer rings there. That's showing the range of the ballistic missiles and the drones, particularly the outer ranges that cover Israel are the Palestine 2 ballistic missile that we've been showing throughout the war, and the drone, the Yafa drone, which we saw penetrate Israel multiple times this week. 38 operations in the past 2 weeks, Abdul Malik al-Houthi said, 23 drone ops, and a number of ballistic missile operations that we can take a look at. One of those, well, let's take a look at number 12. This shows the graphic of where these drone operations targeted. The Air Force, the Yemeni Armed Forces carried out wide-scale military operations with several drones targeting multiple objectives across Israel. One drone targeted Ramon Airport, the international airport down in Eilat. That is on the bottom of the map that you see there. There was 3 drones towards two sensitive sites in the Negev. They don't say what those 2 sites are, but that's the there was reports in the Israeli press that there was sirens in the Dimona nuclear around the nuclear facility, and also Nevatim Air Base, which is the air base that's used for the attacks on Yemen and elsewhere. The attacks on Iran were from that base. Up, you could see up higher, there was the bottom dot is Ashdod. There was a drone attack targeting Ashdod. In Ashdod, there's multiple. There's a refinery and a power plant that are usually what the Yemeni Armed Forces is aiming at. And then up further, you could see Ben Gurion Airport as the target. The Yemeni Armed Forces said the Yemeni Armed Forces confirmed that they will escalate their military operations and will never retreat from the position of supporting Gaza, regardless of the consequences. Yemen was bombed yesterday. 35 people were killed, 150 wounded. The Yemeni Armed Forces also warn all aviation companies that airports inside occupied Palestine are unsafe and they will be consistently targeted. The armed forces of Yemen bear no responsibility for any consequences and stress the need for the immediate halt to all flights into these airports as they are no longer secure. This is part of the airport blockade. That's in addition to the naval blockade that the Yemenis have continued. Let's look at 13, because you can see the drone strike on Ramon Airport. It hit the passenger lounge. It was within feet of airliners. So obviously a direct hit that made it through Israeli defenses. And you can see that there on the Ramon Airport. Number 14 shows another drone that penetrated. This is an Israeli Apache helicopter, American Apache helicopter, chasing IDF flown American helicopter chasing one of these Yafa drones. And you can see it shooting it down here at the end of this video. There was a number of reports from the ground in the West Bank this week and throughout Israel, people reporting watching the drones flying overhead. We saw that as well in the Lebanon front in the war. We saw the Israelis chasing drones around, and that's what we're seeing there. We look at number 15. There was also a qualitative development in the Yemeni front that was announced by Abdel Malik al-Houthi at the end of last month. The missile force announced the significant achievement of developing cluster warheads for the Palestine 2 missiles. These cluster warheads split into multiple warheads. That's on the re-entry vehicle. Abdel Malik al-Houthi says, a major qualitative achievement that has deeply alarmed the enemy. Sirens blared in over 200 locations and millions rushed to shelters, and air traffic was suspended at Ben Gurion Airport. So they have announced the use of cluster munitions in that warhead where the Kafia is. That's the re-entry vehicle. And inside of that are multiple warheads, which means that the air defense systems have to track a number of those missiles, a number of those warheads from the same missile. We can see that from civilian camera in number 16 here. This last video shows what that cluster munition looks like, and it makes it very difficult for the interceptors to pick each one out and to knock it out of the air as it's already entering. Most of these missiles, Israel is attempting to hit them in the outer atmosphere before they break apart like that. But that is a major development on the Yemeni front. So that is what has been going on in Gaza, the West Bank, and Yemen. And that is the resistance report for day 706 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza.